Hi, friends, and a very pleasant good day. Welcome again to 15241 Today Talk, and part two of Jim and Lanny on stage at Upper St. Clair High School. Hopefully you had a chance to see part one of my interview with Jim Render. We've had so much to talk about because of the tremendous success of Jim's career. We've talked about the 1989 and 2006 state championships. Let me open our second part two interview by getting your thoughts about that 400th win that you registered in the fall of 2018.
Oh, my. First of all, you have to be willing to coach a long time to get to that level. And I was so blessed with so many great kids. And we talked about the state championship. So my point being, if you win 15 games one year and 16 another, that's 31 wins in 2 years. So normally, you don't get 31. So the process was speeded up by some great kids going a long way. And so, all of a sudden we're approaching 400 games. And people kept saying, well, you're going to coach till you get 400, aren't you? Well, my answer to that at the time was the 400 would have been nice or is nice, but that wasn't that important to me. I remember I said to a few people, well, if my tombstone says 400 wins on it versus 398, will you come visit more often? Because none of us pay respects at the cemetery as much as we should, whether it's parents or whatever. We don't go as much as we should. So that's why I used that line about if it's 400. People are not going to remember this very long. I mean, you and I talked about Lou Groza and Mel Allen and so forth. There's going to be a lot of people that might watch this segment that have no idea who these people are. And they're not going to remember Jim Render too long either, whether it's 400 or whether it's 350. And I try to be very aware of that. And yes, I'm happy, and yes, it was a great ride, and there's a lot of Upper St. Clair history in that 400. So it's over with.
Well, I've got to say I was honored that I was on the call of that football game, and so
and I was honored you were there.
Yeah, well, I will remember being a part of that for the rest of my life, for however long I live. And you had quite a few of your former players come back for that game.
Yes, I found that out. So, and there was I've heard about people being in the stands that I didn't know were there and didn't see them afterwards either. So, it was fun.
I still have a lot more to ask you about as it relates to the success you've had as a football coach. But let me ask you this question: how did the tradition start that after games you would go to Pizzazz Pizza?
Well,
here's where we went that night.
Because
that's where we went that night. I wanted to make sure that I went there that night.
Here's the truth of the matter. We in the 40 years we did a little of everything after the games. We used to go to Delalo's, and then they opened up the Outback restaurant, and the manager at the Outback at that time was trying to promote the place, and he got some of the people to leave Delalo's to come to the Outback, and of course the coaches were never really comfortable to be around the parents, because I don't care if you win big or lose big, somebody's upset about playing time. And in another year, we went to St. Clair Country Club after the games. And you'd walk in, and half the people were here and half the people were there, and some were happy and some weren't. Now, to answer your question as honestly as I can, the quarterback in 1988, that first championship, was Jerry Bertiotti, whose family has owned the Pizzazz when it was the Pancake House, I believe, Jerry's dad. But anyhow, Jerry is now the owner and proprietor of the Pizzazz, and he takes good care of myself and my friends and my coaches, and when we go down there afterwards. And usually there's not a lot of people by the 11 o'clock hour, so we have the television to ourselves, and we watch the highlights and the scores, and so that's just developed into a little.
Now, would you only go out after games if you won?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, you're no fun to be around when you lose?
History will tell you that I'm a very poor loser. So, and I love Jerry, but I'm not going to go down there when I'm mad. So, so we don't go.
And your coaches, your assistants all understand that that's.
Well, some of them might go. I don't know. I'm only speaking for myself. I like to sit on the back porch and sulk after a loss. That's been documented a few times too.
Jim, in your 40 years at Upper St. Clair, where does it rank the fact that after you won your 400th game, the Steelers invited you to come to a Steeler game? They presented you with a jersey, I believe it was, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then, in addition to that, the NFL this year decided that each NFL team would have a high school coach as a representative, and you were chosen by the Steelers to be the Steelers representative and went to the Pro Bowl, correct?
Correct.
Let's start, first of all, with the day you were at Heinz Field.
Well, the Steelers, most home games, they honor two high school coaches as like their coaches of the week for a victory, in whatever game that had been played recently. So they called and asked if I would come down. And yeah, sure. And I had been there a few years ago, in 2006, I think, after that state championship. But anyhow, then the guy's name is Michael Machinsky, who's like a director of high school relations for the Steelers. So he called and he wanted to know if I could come twice. And I said, Michael, I don't want to go down there twice. I don't think people want to see me presented with a plaque twice. So okay, so we agreed on one game, and then I got there, and it wasn't the customary little plaque. Here was this jersey framed with the number 400 on it and my name, and they really shocked me big time with that. Mike Tomlin came over right before the game, and that was neat. And then at halftime, or no, they do it at the 2-minute warning right at the end of the first half. And Jim Furyk was there promoting the Ryder Cup, I believe. And these people all started yelling, Jim, Jim, and I thought they were yelling at me. I guess my ego got caught up. But anyhow, they were yelling at Furyk, and then after I got this award, I turned around, and he was about 15 feet away, and we made eye contact, so I went over to shake his hand, and what a gracious guy. Just like the golfers always take their hat off and shake hands at the end. As I approached Jim Furyk, he took his hat off, and we shook hands, and I kidded him. I says, I thought all these people were yelling at me. Here they're yelling at you.
The framed jersey, where is that now? In your house?
It is.
In your den?
It's in the den. It's just kind of propped up. I mean, the thing's huge.
Weighs a lot, correct?
Yes. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I've offered to give the school district, a lot of my mementos if they want them. I'm not sure where that stands right now, but if you coach long enough, you're going to get a few plaques and different things, and I've got a lot of stuff. And my two sons, they can't take all that stuff. They have their own house and their own kids and their own lives, and so I don't want it just pitched, but some of that may happen unless we can find some place that the school might want to display them.
You've mentioned your sons Eric and JT. How big a deal was it for you to have a chance to coach them in high school football?
Well, it was a lot of fun. First of all, when I moved up here from Uniontown, we lived in South Park. And so the kids were going to school in South Park, and I was coaching over here, and then they would be the sideline ball boys on Friday nights. My point being that at the dinner table, we would discuss Upper St. Clair much more than we discussed the grade schools at South Park. And finally, I lived over there 7 years. Nice neighborhood, good, the kids had friends. But anyhow, I finally decided that as JT, the older one, approached junior high school and high school, I finally made a statement that if he was going to be coached by a jerk, it was going to be this jerk. So I put a for sale sign up out in the front yard, and I said, we're moving to Upper St. Clair, so that we could all talk about the same things, and have the same home base. And so then I got to coach them, and
what was there pressure on them to play football?
I wouldn't say pressure. I think they wanted to play, and as I recall, they played in a youth football in the Bethel Park. There was some tie-in between South Park and Bethel Park, and as I recall, we played in a Bethel Park league. And but when they got over here at Upper St. Clair, I didn't pressure them, and they wanted to play. I remember our athletic director at the time, Mike Shalahita, he actually pulled me in one day and said I wasn't being fair to JT, that I should play him, that I shouldn't hold him back. And so anyhow, it worked out.
You're anticipating my next question. I was going to say, was it tough for JT and Eric to be the sons playing for you?
No, they held their own. JT wasn't as he played behind a couple pretty good kids when he was a sophomore and junior, but he got playing time, and then he was a bona fide starter as a senior. Eric, on the other hand, was a starter as a junior linebacker. So there wasn't a lot of pressure. They earned their way.
All right, tell us about JT and Wendy have two children, right? Ruby and Roman James.
Right.
Tell everyone about those two grandchildren.
Well, they live in a suburb of Cleveland called Bay Village, and they actually live about 3 walking blocks from Lake Erie. I know a lot of people in Pittsburgh look down on Cleveland, but There's some nice suburbs on the west side and the east side, but it's nice. And Ruby, the oldest girl, is in the 3rd grade, and she's somewhat of an athlete, likes to play soccer, and she likes to swim, and her mother was a volleyball player. I think she's playing a little volleyball. And Roman, he's a spitball, missing his front teeth, living large. I'm not sure what he'll do athletically. He's playing a little baseball right now.
Eric and Zoe have George and June.
Right, in New York City. And I just got back recently from a babysitting venture in New York City, which that's fun until it rains. And, New York's different, I think everybody knows that. But they actually live in Brooklyn Heights. And I walk down to the end of their block, and I sit on a bench. And to the left is the Statue of Liberty, and to the right is the Brooklyn Bridge and the skyline and the helicopters and the boats, and I just sit there like the tourist that I am and take it all in. Sometimes I see the same view if you ever watch Tom Selleck and Blue Bloods,
All the time.
Yeah, so some of the scenes, and there's a show on Showtime called Billions that's filmed in New York. And in fact, the one scene not too long ago was filmed in a bar restaurant called Donahue's. And somehow my son Eric got to know these people he has his own little birthday celebration in Donahue's every year. So Billions had a scene filmed in Donahue. So, it's kind of neat to see some of that stuff.
June 1st, 2019, Jim Render, WPIAL Hall of Fame. How do you feel about that honor?
Oh, you weren't supposed to bring that up. That was supposed to be. Well, there's two things. First of all, Sean Lee, they've been wanting Sean Lee to come for several years. In fact, they asked me to call him. And to fast forward on that story, now they wanted to take me in, and I wasn't sure Sean would come because his time commitments, and his sister's wedding is 2 weeks later, so I wasn't sure he would want to come to Pittsburgh that often. But anyhow, I called him and I said, it might be neat if we could go in together. And then I told him Paul Puzzle-Leslie was going to also be inducted, and he said, I'll be there. And then when I went to the press conference about this WPIAL Hall of Fame, they gave me a list of the other inductees. And the name right below mine was Gary Tranquil. Now, Gary Tranquil is from Avella, and he's actually going in as an outstanding athlete. He was a teammate and a very, very dear friend of mine at Wittenberg. And he's also been a coach. He coached with Belichick, and he coached with Saban, and Gary at one time was the head coach of the Naval Academy. Well, to be going into this Hall of Fame with Sean Lee and Gary Tranquil, I mean, I could not write a script that would come out any better, So, yes, I'm looking very much forward to that evening because of the people I'm going to be surrounded with, really. But it should be a fun night. And let me tell you one other quick little thing. Gary Tranquil's wife, Shirley, also a Wittenberg person. I emailed her not too long ago. When Gary coached at West Virginia University, Shirley was into gymnastics and so forth. So she was a judge at times, and she was also a coach. So she went down to Fairmont, West Virginia, and taught a little girl all about gymnastics. And that little girl is Mary Lou Retton. And, of course, the Carolis get all the credit for our Olympic development but Shirley Tranquil, who we called Bean in college, I'm not sure why, but Bean was the one responsible for teaching Mary Lou. So Shirley will be at the Hall of Fame too, June 1st. So.
Great story. Yeah. Back to the Upper St. Clair football traditions. Why did you never have logos on the helmets?
Well, we painted those helmets black when I got here. And I used to sit in Uniontown Stadium and put the stripes on the helmets and the decals, which I didn't enjoy that too much, But anyhow, as it was, we were going to play Uniontown this first year. And I was given a little bit of a tour around some of our facilities to a couple of Uniontown kids that I had been close to. And the one young man said, he said, I hate those dark black helmets that you guys wear. It reminds me of Darth Vader, and they're so intimidating. Now, this was in 1979. I made up my mind those helmets would never have anything on them other than black. And I don't know what the new regime's going to do with those helmets, but as long as I was here, they were going to be black.
What about the Browns' influence in your life? That have anything to do with
the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah.
Well, when I grew up there, I lived through the Jim Brown era, and of course, when I was in junior high or whatever it was, Chuck Noll was the messenger guard. Do you know that term? Messenger guard? Mm-hmm. That meant that Chuck carried the play in from Paul Brown, and so he and another guard rotated taking the plays in. So there was Jim Brown, Chuck Noll, Dante Lavelli, Lou Groza, Otto Graham, and that was a great time. And then when they ran out of glory years in Cleveland, I moved to Pittsburgh. I knew when to jump ship, and I got in on the Terry Bradshaw, George Perlis. His kids played for me. He was the defensive coordinator of the Steelers, and of course Chuck lived right up the street here, across from Eisenhower School. And I didn't have a lot of conversations with Chuck, but I had a few, and memorable.
Jim, you and I have had a chance to talk for about an hour in these two-part interviews. You should write a book. Have you thought about that?
I have thought about writing a book, and I may do that. I've just given away about 5 chapters right here on this. So anyhow, I'm looking into that, and I may do it. I enjoy writing for the magazine. I had an English teacher in high school, Miss Laura Eberwine, and she used to say to me, I taught your mother, your father, your uncle, your sister, and I go to your church, and I'm waiting on you. And she was a very influential person.
What did she mean, I'm waiting on you?
She was an English teacher in the high school.
Okay, waiting for you to come and have a chance for her to teach you. Okay.
Yes. Because she said I had your mother, your father, your sister. and I'm waiting on you. She used to point that little crooked finger out there. And one of her famous lines was, "Time waits for no man," which is a line that I've used with my players over the years. They probably don't remember Laura Eberwine, but most of my players would tell you they remember me saying, "Time waits for no man." Let's get going. So I took journalism and English from Miss Eberwine, and she was an influence, and I think she had a big part of why I like to write.
Jim, thanks for spending so much time with us. You're a great man. You and Pam are wonderful, dear friends of mine, and as I said,
we are going to reverse this someday, are we not?
Well, possibly, yes.
Yeah,
but
I'm going to be on your side.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about a former Upper St. Clair resident, Lanny Fratteri.
All right, Jim, thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you.
Jim Render, two-part interview on 15241 Today Talk. Thanks for joining us.